Hey there. Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Today's episode is episode 189, an interview with Dr. Cléo Palacio-Quintin. Hey there! Thank you so much for checking out this episode. I hope that Series 40 has brought you many gold nuggets that you can start implementing within your music business or your artistic world today. I want to give you 2 upcoming events so that way you can jot it down in your calendar. I would love to see you at these opening and closing gala events being hosted by the SBO and Flute 360. The first event is scheduled for Thursday, February 3rd, 2022 at 7 p.m. Central Time. This is a great time to network with like-minded musicians from across the globe. You will get to meet the performers, the organizers, and the collaborators through this international festival. Please go down to the show notes, and I have provided a registration link so that way you can register for this opening gala. FYI, only 100 people can attend. So if you go ahead and grab your seat now, then you will be sure to be allowed into the opening gala on February 3rd, 2022. The second event is scheduled for Monday, February 28th at 7 p.m. Central Time. This is the closing gala where we get to thank our collaborators, our sponsors, our directors, and performers. Just like the opening gala, the closing gala has a registration link provided below. Go to the show notes below and check out this link, sign up, so that way you ensure that you reserve your seat for this special event. I hope that you get to make new music friends that will last a very long time. I will see you soon. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Flute 360 podcast interview. I am stoked for this specific series because I get to make new friends and I get to highlight an extraordinary flute festival. Ron Royer is the organizer of an upcoming flute festival, which is going down in February 2022. And I am co-hosting this flute festival with him, and I just cannot wait to present it to the world. So if you want to check out February's event, I am going to put the link in the show notes below. And it's going to highlight beautiful flutists from across the globe. It's going to also highlight your flute friends. There was a video proposal going down throughout the fall semester of 2021, and your flute friends from the Montana Flute Association, the New Jersey Flute Society, and the Texas Flute Society submitted proposals. So if you want to check out those performances and presentations, please do so. And the other side to this series that I'm extremely pumped about is that I get to collaborate and make new music friends. So without further ado, please help me welcome my new friend, Cléo, to the show. Welcome, Cléo.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm really good, and I'm happy to be here talking with you today.
Yes, same. What we were saying before the talk is how wonderful it is to communicate through email and messages, but it's a whole different story when you get to actually put the name to a face. So thank you for carving out time for us.
My pleasure.
Excellent. Can you please share with the listeners a little bit about yourself so that way they can get to know you?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm first, of course, a flutist, trained in classical music, and I've done most of my studies in Montreal. at the University of Montreal, where I made a bachelor and a master's in flute interpretation. But then I also specialized early on in new music. So that's always been really my cup of tea, is like new repertoire and creation. And so I've been studying with Robert Dick during my studies here in Montreal as well. I was doing workshops with him and so on. So early on in my career, I really got into new music and improvised music, and also like extending the flute sound with contemporary techniques. And then I decided to add another layer of extended techniques by adding electronics to my flutes. So I made a big specialty in building hyper flutes, which are actually flutes with the electronics. So they have sensors on them. And so I can trigger really in real time, I can manipulate electronic sounds directly with my flute while I perform. So I made a specialization like this in live electronics, doing mostly solo stuff and chamber music as well. A lot of my own creations, actually. I became a composer after my flute training and started working a lot with live electronics, and also ended up composing for others' instruments as well. Now I've been a full-time composer and performer for many years now. And so that's the big picture. But of course, maybe I should mention as well that I don't only play written repertoire, but I also perform a lot of improvised music. And the last few years, I perform a lot with an ensemble in Montreal, which is called Ensemble Super Musique. And it's a whole group of really great improvisers, musicians. And we play always with a quite big group of at least 12 people most of the time, sometimes up to 20. And mostly improvised music, but also with scores, with graphic scores, with improvised instructions and stuff like that. So yeah, my practice is really a mix of, as well, flute and electronics and improv all mixed up together. And I also add the visual arts to it since many years as well. When I started doing live electronics with the flute, then early on, I realized, okay, I can also do live video processing using the same tools that I use for the music. And so I'm also performing with video, which I also control with my hyperflutes. And so I can, in real time, like having the video changing, following my gestures while I play, which is awesome.
Oh, very neat. I love that. How do you juggle all of those different hats?
I'm always out of breath, I would say. I miss time all the time. I'm always too busy, but I just love so much all I do that I don't want to give up on any of these. And so, I kept doing all of them. And often I have, periods where I work more on composing, and other times I work more on performing. And, it varies because I cannot do everything every day. It's just too much. But I've been managing so far. So I hope I'll keep doing that. And especially that I also work a lot as a music, like programmer, producer, because as I do mainly new music and creation, and I've always been a self-entrepreneur, and I'm always produce my own concerts. And here in Montreal, especially, we also have, a system of funding and so on that's very good for artists to be independent and make their own things and get funding to help them and so on. So I'm also like managing production company of Super Musique and my own as well, so that I can produce my own projects with colleagues, different musicians. And
Fantastic. Yeah.
So busy life.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you are self-employed and that you set up all of these different events and tours, etc. If there was a musicpreneur or a musician who is an entrepreneur currently or a wannabe musicpreneur, what advice would you give to them as they are navigating this new world and this new music industry that we currently live in?
Yeah, actually, but it's been changing so much just in the last few years with all, more and more online stuff. And I must say, I'm a bit out of date on that level because because I've always been really a scene performer, on stage.
Okay.
And I'm not much into recording and doing stuff that's fixed because all my work is always interactive, and I love all my compositions always involve some kind of improv, or the electronics parts are always made in real time, so they change every time I play the piece. It's never exactly the same. So I've never liked to record things because then they are fixed, and for me, the music is something alive, which needs to be different every time. And so I much more prefer to play on stage. So I've never been a fan of recording stuff. So like also the, publicating stuff online for me it's not that interesting because of the type of work I do.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm not a good advisor for online things or, recorded things. But as a performer, organizing my own concerts has always been for me the way to be able to exactly do what I want to do, like not rely on, jobs that people offer me to do. And and as I always wanted to make my own music and create my own things, for me, that was a natural path to just, get myself organized and manage to do it, because nobody else would ask me to do this if I don't do it myself. But I must say, I'm lucky to be living here in Montreal, where we have lots of help from the governments here for arts, and so that of course makes it easier to be able to get subsidized by the state and the city, and to help promote our own work. So that's of course very different in even in other Canadian provinces. It's very different than it is here in Quebec. We're lucky.
Interesting. So is it a combination of you asking a specific venue or institution to be invited, and also the flip side, you being invited by an organization to perform? So is most of your events through your tour, is that set up by you initiating the dialogue to kind of invite yourself, or is it also a mixture of them inviting you as well?
Yeah, it's always, of course, it's always a mixture, especially for me, as have had a quite long career already. I'm 50 already, so I've been going around for a while. But yeah, it's always like both sides. Is that I have some projects which are like going on, like for example, a duet of improv music with Philippe Lausier, and so we've been playing together for several years. So now many people kind of know us, and so once in a while someone will ask, okay, we want your duet to come over and play in our festival or something like that. But as well, on the other side, I always have like my own projects going on where I will myself like go towards promoters and people who have concert series and so on, and to propose, okay, I'd like to present that new work next year, or sometimes, in 2 years, because we often plan long ahead, especially with this granting situation here. We always have to ask, grants long in advance, and then we make sure we get it. And of course that helps, but the system here in Quebec is really much organized like this, that most organizations who present concerts are self-producers, like So yeah, we collaborate a lot within different small organizations like that, especially for new music. We are really tight, and it's a very good community here in Montreal. We even have a group that's called Le Vivier, which actually put together all the small organizations who do new music and ensembles, and as well as soloists like me, and we're all in a group together so that we have a big concert series running. But we're 60 members, so it's quite big. There's lots of new music going on here in Montreal.
That's exciting. Yeah, I figured that it was a mixture of both, but I wanted to highlight this nugget of you initiating some of these events, because sometimes my 360 listeners are within the younger generation, and sometimes they think, oh, and no judgment, just an observation. One of their pain points is, well, how do I create new music opportunities for myself? And a lot of times, especially with my own students, I'm like, you start the conversation, reach out to somebody,
reach out,
get the ball rolling, get it going, because you never know.
Yeah, and I think, the best way to make your path somewhere in that music world is to find your own voice, and so you must then propose yourself, what you want to do, what calls you, make the first steps to propose your repertoire or what you want to perform, or put together a project is really the best way to reach out and interest people to listen to you, actually.
Yeah, I could not have said that better myself, and highlighting everybody's own unique skill sets. We all have these different creative skills and voices to offer the world in our very special way. And so what do you propose? Yeah,
so whatever repertoire you play, or in my case, it was really new stuff, like inventing new things. So it's more obvious maybe, but still, I think even with someone who plays like really classical flute repertoire, still needs to get his own proposal voice, show his identity and specialty somehow in his project.
Yes. Yes, I couldn't agree more. So you mentioned that you worked for some time with Robert Dick.
That was long ago.
Was it long ago? Okay. How are those studies? Because he's a fantastic flutist and teacher. I had the pleasure of having him on the show through episodes 89 through 92. And we had a wonderful series, and he was demonstrating things with his glissando head joints and extended techniques. So I kind of want to peek into your world, you being a pupil of his.
Yeah, he's been a huge influence on me. Actually, I guess if I hadn't met him in my 20s, probably I wouldn't play flute anymore because the classical repertoire, I was not attracted to this much. So that was not an option for me. I never wanted to play orchestral stuff and so on. But already in my teenage, I was playing flute, but I was already playing jazz music and improv. That was really the thing that I was more attracted to. And so I was lucky to meet Robert when I just started my bachelor degree. And then I made several summer schools with him, like 2 weeks intensive classes during the summer with him. That was really the start of that. And so he's really the one who made me discover like improvised, like free improvisation, really, and extended techniques on the flute. And so I kept like seeing him and as much as I could during my studies. And during my master's degree, I would travel to New York once in a while to get private lessons with him. And so, yeah, he's been really, really great. And after as well, I must mention, I also went to Amsterdam to study with Anne Leberge, which is also another fantastic flutist, playing lots of new music and improv as well. And she's also a composer.
Mhm.
And she's the one who pushed me towards more electronics stuff. So she's the one who's really been the trigger of that, because she was playing with electronics already. And for me, that was the time where it was possible to start doing this only with a computer, besides of using like heavy hardware, which was the only option before, and which Anne was doing already. And she pushed me to go towards the live electronics on the computer, because she felt that I was made for that. Like it was my line to follow. So she was right.
Mhm. Oh, that's
And she was a
wonderful.
great teacher as well.
I love it when mentors come around us and surround us and really uplift us and encourage us, especially on those non-traditional paths.
Yeah.
And we need them.
Of course.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
definitely. So you mentioned a while back your hyperflute.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's when I was in Amsterdam around the year 2000. I moved there in 99 to study with Anne. And then the next year in 2000, actually, I was studying at the conservatory in Den Haag, which has a sonology program, which is specialized in electronics. And there I built my first hyperflute on the standard flute, where I actually made a system of sensors that like really sticked on the flute, so that I get this data from the flute going to the computer when I play, which can actually sense very, very tiny gestures, like move of keys, pressure of the thumbs and pressure of the hand on the flute as well, and movement when I move the flute. So this is like lots of refined data that I can get into the computer. And so I can transform my sound. So I always use my flute sound and I transform it in real time using those controllers. So I really had to learn to play this. It's like another level of performing above the flute itself.
Yeah.
But it's been years and years since 99 that I'm playing on that instrument. So I really built my habit to play with it. And then many years later, I've always played a lot of bass flute as well for a long time. When I lived in the Netherlands, I used to play bass flute in a flute orchestra, and I loved it. So when I came back to Montreal, I decided to make a doctoral studies and specialized in electroacoustic music. And then I developed the system of sensors on my bass flute. So I also have a hyper bass flute now, which I play even more than the small one. And so that was in 2008 that I finished my building my hyper bass flute. So it's the same principle. It's pretty similar to the system I have on my flute as well. A bunch of sensors and buttons on the flute itself. And so I can really perform with electronics, but I keep the control of the electronics within my hands as I do with the flute, which is what I love, because when you play a piece, with flute and electronics where you have no control on the electronics at all, it's a totally different, a totally different way of playing, because you have to follow the tape. If it's a recorded tape, it won't wait for you if you take a breath. But in my case, I never have this problem because I'm controlling the electronics, so it follows me. It does what I ask to do. Yeah,
that's nice. So one of the things that I loved in your biography, you identify with all of these traditional roles, educator, flutist, things like that. But I also saw this title of instrument inventor, which is your hyperflute. But you're almost a sound inventor also. Would you give yourself that title of sound inventor?
But of course, I think probably that any composer working with electronics is actually inventing new sounds, because
Right.
that's the idea of the whole electroacoustic world,
Uh-huh.
is to create new sounds with the computer.
Yeah.
And so, of course, in my case, the fact that I mix the live flute and the live electronics so much really intervened, in a very close way. Um, of course, I reach type of sounds that I guess nobody else can do,
Yeah.
because it's, the system I use makes this link possible so close by between the electronics and the flute. And I mean, there is other flutists who plays as well with sensors and live electronics, but I don't know of any who has a so complex system than the one I have. And the thing is that I've really been one of the pioneer, because I started doing that really, really at the beginning of when it was possible to do it.
Yeah.
So nowadays there's much more people doing that kind of work.
Yeah.
But when I started, I was the only one. I had several colleagues and mentors, but not flutists, actually.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm considered like a pioneer in that level. But and of course, yeah, the fact that I have so many years of experience with it, I've managed to find my own sound in this world.
So since you are a pioneer within this genre, as you were leading the way for others to hopefully follow down your path, so that way there would be more, people on this road with you, was it lonely in the beginning stages of being a pioneer?
Very lonely. Yeah. But actually, at the start, when I started that project, when I lived in the Netherlands, where there is a community of people doing that kind of stuff. So there I was not lonely at the beginning. But when I moved back to Montreal in 2002, then here, nobody was doing that type of work yet. So, or very, very few people. And especially performers. That's the thing. It's this type of, playing with live electronics and so on. It's more something that's being developed by composers who are doing electroacoustic music. But performers who really dedicate to, specializing in that, there's not many of them. Now there's much more, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know them all, of course, but I know there is more and more, because the tools are much more available, not too expensive anymore. When I started, having an interface to plug sensors, it was really extremely expensive. So few people could manage. And I could start doing that, because in Sonology, we could build our own interfaces. They were giving us, the learning to build it ourselves. So we just had to pay the electronic parts, but we didn't need to buy the $2,000 machine at the store.
Yeah.
So that's how I started doing it myself. The DIY is really the way, and that kind of thing. But now it's much easier, because you can buy kits online for $30 and do, and build your own thing. And there's big community, there's lots of help online and so on. So live electronics is much more accessible now for anybody who wants to do that.
Sure.
And home computers as well, like any laptop now is strong enough to process sound, which was not the case in the 90s, of course.
True.
So at the beginning, when I started, that was very, very complicated. We didn't have, a tenth of what we can do now in our computers.
So in the beginning stages, again, I have another question within this little season of your life. Did you feel like you had to sell this genre? Because obviously you loved it and you had a passion for it and you wanted to get it out into the world. But did you have to convince people that they should listen to it and consider it as art, as music, and come to these concerts?
I guess so, but me, not more than anybody else who's doing new art, I think.
Okay.
In any disciplines, as I guess it's always the same when you come up with contemporary art, which is not something people are used to.
True.
You somehow always have to convince people. But I think that, yeah, the hard thing is to bring them to the concert hall. But once they're there, it's never been a problem for me, because the fact that, yeah, my flute with the sensors, there's something very organic about it, because it's really linked to my body and my gestures. And so you can actually see me moving and hear the sound that comes with, it's really embodied somehow. And so most people, even who are not used to that type of music, are usually touched by it, because there's, I think, this personal embodied feel to it.
Sure. Oh, I love that. So can you specifically name any like compositions, like titles that were written and that are written for the hyperflute, if there's somebody out there who really wants to check it out?
But of course, I've composed myself several pieces over the years. And now actually I'm just like next week actually premiering a piece live, which is called La connaissance ruisselée des solides. But you'll be happy to know that there's already an online version of it, because that's a piece that I've been working on for a long time. I had performed a couple of unfinished versions of it beforehand. But last year I had a residency in Chicoutimi in a center called the Centre d'Expérimentation Musicale. And they always do recordings and video captations of the performances of their resident. And so I'm lucky to have like 4 of my pieces that have been recorded there last year. And normally we do a live concert there as well, but because of the pandemic, we could not perform in public last year when I was there. And so we postponed the concert to this year. So I'm going actually next week to perform the pieces live with musicians there in Chicoutimi, because some pieces are chamber music pieces. But I have a big solo piece with poetry from Thierry Dimanche, who's a poet who lives in Ontario. And so I have this beautiful solo hyper bass flute piece in that program. But you can find them all online. I'll give you the links so that you can put it on your site. And so that solo piece is online since almost a year now.
Congratulations. I will definitely put the link in the show notes below.
So that's, of course, that's one recording of the piece, which, as I say, it's like every time I perform it, it's different.
Sure.
I mean, it's always the same composition. You can always recognize it, but there's lots of different details. And every time I play it, also in the video, there's also live video processing with that piece.
So kind of circling back to the beginning of our conversation and into what you just mentioned with your compositions, can you tell the listeners your affiliation with the ACWC?
Yeah, but I'm actually a member of the organization. And actually they just last week, actually no, even yesterday, was it yesterday? They presented a concert of a different repertoire from members. And that was a concert that was planned as well last year and couldn't happen because of pandemic, and it's been postponed. And
wow.
And finally happened. So they had one of my chamber music piece performed there.
Cool.
With musicians from Toronto. And so that's been just published online as well yesterday. So the piece, it was an old piece of mine, actually. That's a piece I wrote for a trio in Montreal many years ago. It's for flute, percussion, and bass clarinet, and a little of electronics as well. So yeah, that's one piece, a piece homage to Piazzolla, actually, that I wrote a long time ago. And it had never been re-performed after the premiere. That's the thing with new music. Most of the time we make, creations and they're played once and that's it. And so I was happy to have this piece like re-performed by different performers. It doesn't happen often. So that was nice.
Oh, neat. Very cool. So I know, Cleo, that we have discussed a lot between your compositional process and the hyperflute events, ACWC, etc. Is there anything that you want to leave the listener with? Any last sentiments?
Yeah, so I think maybe the most important thing I'd like to leave the listeners with is this idea of finding your own voice. I think as a musician, as an artist, that's really the best way to be happy and also to manage to build a career and get work. I mean, if you have your own voice, that's the way, I think, to reach that.
That is a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me in your podcast. It's a pleasure.
Oh my goodness, the pleasure is all mine. And thank you for teaching us. Thank you for sharing with us. And I am beyond thrilled that our paths have crossed.
Me too. Thanks so much.
Hey, Flute 360er. Thank you so much for tuning into the Flute 360 podcast. Please go ahead and follow me through the different social media platforms. This way, you don't miss out on any podcast news and or updates. My social media handle is at Heidi K. Begay via Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I cannot wait to start a new conversation with you today. Lastly, Flute 360 has a YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and check out Heidi K. Begay's YouTube channel. This way, you can see myself and my guests in action. Take care. Let's talk about flute.